Welcome. I'm Debbie Rosas, and you're listening to Get In. It's a podcast about conversation, everything about body and life. I'm the founder of NIA, an international body and life experience. It's a holistic workout, it's a personal practice, and it's also a lifestyle. And it's been changing people's lives since 1983. Our topic today is something dear to my heart. It is the soft side. It's the soft shoe of movement and fitness. And if you are into mind and body and transformation from the inside out, you're going to want to listen to this conversation. It's about Tai Chi. I talk about Tai Chi again as that soft shoe. It's about movement, it's about the music of your breath, and the magic that occurs when we move in a way that aligns us with the universe. It aligns us with the trees and the wind and the sky and the fire, all the elements that our body remembers. Now, you may not remember, but our body remembers it. This is my very first book of Tai Chi. And I read this book. It's called Embrace Tiger Return to the Mountain, The Essence of Tai Chi. I read this book when I had first taken some Tai Chi classes in San Francisco. And oh my God, if you think about taking an aerobics person that was high energy and putting them amidst all of these beautiful Tai Chi seasoned elders, I stuck out. Why did I stick out? I had no flow. I had no connection to movement and breath. And that's when I realized there's a whole lot here to moving the body and breathing that I had no idea how to even tap into it. My guest today knows how to tap into it. Welcome, David-Dorian Ross. It's so great
Hi,
to have
Debbie.
you.
Oh,
All
it's
right.
really great to be here.
So, how does it feel to sit here and go, you know what? I'm a renowned Tai Chi champion. I'm like, what? Recognized by this beautiful practice, an 8-time US, everybody catch this, an 8-time US gold medalist and world silver and bronze medalist. Okay, that's very impressive. So when I think about movement, breath, and flow, you have come to mind. You were the first non Asian to win a medal at the 1991 World Wushu Championship in Beijing. What what even made you think that you could go there and win? I want that historical story. Take us back. How old were you? What was going on?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first thing I want to say is when you held up that book, that was also my first book on Tai Chi. I still have it.
Yeah.
And the author, Al Wong, Tung Liang Wong, is my teacher.
Oh,
So
wow.
I have
Okay.
his, and when I first read the book, I thought to myself, someday I want to meet this guy. Someday I want to take lessons from him. And fast forward 30 plus years, and I finally met him at Esalen,
Uh-huh.
and we connected, and he took me on as a student. And so that's a that's a great connection there. And you couldn't find a better book on Tai Chi. It really set my course of journey right from the very beginning. After my very first Tai Chi class that I ever took at university, I ran out of the class and I ran across the quad, San Francisco State. It was also San Francisco, into the bookstore looking for a book on Tai Chi, and there in the used book section was that copy, and I still have it to this day. So, um,
Well, I can remember thinking that other books were like that. So then I picked up this one, right? Okay, right. And I remember opening it and going, oh my God, the artistry, the the metaphysics, the connection, the intimacy, the relationship. You can have the moves, which I say that about Nia as well. It's not the movement, it's what you put into it. It's the relationship that you create with that move. And being in your presence and having an opportunity to, I lift my hands in a different way, to do push hands in a different way, wave the clouds, whatever. Those are all actions, but it's the essence. And I think what you're talking about is his essence of transmitting the work, which is what you do. You transmit it from such love. So here you are. How old were you when you thought, I think I'm going to go to the 1991 World Wushu Championships and see how well I do?
Well, let's see. That was 1991. Um, now I forget how old. I must have been around in my early 30s
Mhm.
at that point in time. So there's a very interesting trajectory to being a competitive athlete. Um, I started out competing in martial arts right away because I needed some street cred, to be honest with you, because it would often transpire that I would hold a class and people would show up for class and they say, "Where's the teacher?" And I said, "Well, I'm the teacher." And they say, "Well, but you're white."
Yeah.
And
Right.
so
We
I
don't
said, "Where's
trust
the
you.
Chinese guy?" Yeah, that didn't trust me. So I thought, you know, I, I don't know what one could do. So there was this whole world of competitive martial arts, and I began to enter into that pretty early on, um, and started winning, martial arts tournaments. And so I began to climb up the ladder, so to speak, of ratings in the United States, competing not just against other Tai Chi people, but against people who were performing karate and taekwondo and all kinds of other martial arts, and doing well against them until finally, I started winning the grand championships at all these tournaments, and across the spectrum of different Chinese martial arts competitions, winning gold medals in Tai Chi. And so in 1991, the first World Chinese Martial Arts Championships were held in Beijing. And it was meant to be a precursor to the 2000 Olympics, which was when Beijing was vying to host at that time. It was a big deal. They wanted to be the millennial Olympic host, and
Right.
they would add Chinese martial arts to an Olympic event. But before that can happen, they have to hold these world championships that are participated in by, a certain number of countries. So in 1991, I went to the US team trials to compete to see if I could make it on the team. And I'll never forget, I almost didn't make it on the team. One of my very, very best friends, whose name is Joshua Grant, had just come back from China and was also at the team trials. And he was so gorgeous. Oh my gosh. This man's movement is just, turn you on just to watch. And we were neck and neck, and he went over the time limit and was unfortunately got a deduction that put me onto the team, because there were several other styles that were going on the team. There was only one
Wow.
slot for a Tai Chi person. And so from that day on, every time Joshua and I competed against one another, I would always win. And he would always go, "I can't, you're," and I honestly think he's better than I. I
Ah,
really do. He's just so wonderful. Well, going to the competition that year, they had instituted a new compulsory routine. In many sports, they have a compulsory, like in figure skating or in gymnastics or things like that.
exactly.
They have a routine that you have to do so they can compare everybody across the board.
Mhm.
But nobody knew the routine, like all across the world. It was so brand new. Nobody had any training in it. So I was scrambling around trying to find someone who had a tape. Once upon a time, children, there were things
There were
called
little
VHS.
cassette tapes.
Yes, right. So I was trying to find somebody who had a tape, and I kept calling up all the people in the US who were big coaches and everything. And to be honest with you, I couldn't get anybody to help me. And one person actually said, listen, you're not going to do well. If you place in the top 30, consider yourself lucky, because you're just not that good and you can't compete against, the Chinese.
So you had a lot of, I'm going to say, dark forces coming at you that required that you dig inside to find some sort of belief in yourself. Wow.
So going to China was such a a feast for the senses, right? In so many different ways. So I had my own internal feelings about being in competition, about whether or not I was going to perform um, in such a way that I could be proud of myself, and not let down my team and the U.S. Um, so I just determined to do the best I could, and the competition was broken into 2 days. And the first day so there were over 40 countries competing
Wow.
in this competition. So it was a big, big event. People from all over China had come to Beijing to watch the foreigners do Chinese martial
Right.
arts. And I was competing on the second day. And the first day, I did not watch any of my competition. I didn't watch any of the other countries or anything because I didn't want to get freaked out. I didn't want to
Yeah.
get freaked out.
Smart
So
move.
I didn't know. I didn't know who was competing. I didn't know who had done well. I didn't know what the scores were. And so I go up to compete, and my scores were pretty good. I mean,
Mhm.
I thought my scores were not, anything to be embarrassed about. And I came back, and I remember there was this young girl that our team had made friends with from the Hong Kong team.
Mhm.
And she ran up to me and I said, how do you think I did? She goes, you're in second place. You're in second place right now. Right. So we kind of all knew who the gold medalist was likely to be. It was this guy from Japan who was just amazing. And so to be in second place behind him, I was like, did somebody die? I mean, like, what happened? And she said, you probably won't take the silver because there's another guy from China who's retiring this year. And the politics of the
Sure.
international
Sure.
competition was that, and he was good. He was really good. Right. So he took second and I took the bronze medal. And I was the only non-Asian in the entire games to take a medal, in the first three places. Um, Afterwards, I remember one of my students had come along on the trip, and she went to the team coach, and she was like, what do you think about DDR's performance? And he was like, oh my gosh, it was so great. And she said, don't you wish you had supported him before he got here? So,
Yeah. Right.
that's now I have to say that the thing about competition is, um, it it can be a a misleading kind of approach because it's really what things look like from the outside. And Tai Chi is much more rewarding when you understand what it feels like on the inside.
Yeah.
And so at one point, about, 25 years ago, I decided to completely go back to ground zero and as if I had forgotten everything I'd ever learned about
Yeah.
Tai Chi and start over from scratch and focus instead on the internal. And so today, even when you and I and Carlos were working together over in Portland, I teach very differently, and I approach the movements very, very differently.
What's
And I
different?
think it's
Can you describe, is it less mechanical? Is it more touch? Is it more felt sense intrinsic? How do you describe the difference?
a great question. Um, in the early days, partly influenced by my competitive approach, but also by the convention of Tai Chi teaching in the 20th century, um, absolute precision of movement was very important. So you
Mhm.
go, like you read Herman's book, you held up Chung Liang's book, and then you held Herman's book. And if you look at Herman's book, that's all about what is the exact placement of the
Exactly.
hands, and where should this be, and how much rotation, and all that kind of stuff. And so I was always very precise. I mean, that's one reason why I did well in competition, is that um, just as a small aside here, I'm terrible at movement. I
Oh
am
my god, you are not.
I am so like I'm just um, like the word. I've never had a student in my 45, 50 years of teaching that was as bad at Tai Chi in the beginning as I was. I was just the worst. So in order to overcome, not being all that natural a mover, I analyzed every movement from a biomechanical breakdown
Yeah.
to understand the exact amount of, kinesiological adjustments that needed to be made to create these postures. And then I would translate that into a, you know, normal language, teachable kind of, you know, vocabulary. You know, now I tell my students all the time, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It's absolutely immaterial, right? It it matters what it feels like. But here's the thing: Tai Chi as a movement art is fundamentally based upon a neutral alignment of the body,
Mhm.
and then an intention for how you would engage with another force, whether that's another human being or with a tree or with the air or whatever. So there's an intention about how you would engage. And there's so many different ways of engaging. There's a
Mhm.
soft way of engaging. There's a hard way of engaging. There's a welcoming way of engaging. There's a let's keep the action out here way of engaging, all that kind of stuff. And if you have the neutral alignment to begin with and the intention, in your mind, your body falls into what we would call a Tai Chi posture effortlessly and without needing any kind of, oh, you got to adjust here, you got to do it there. It's just like, once you have learned to walk, all I have to do is point over there, say, go over there, and you just walk
Exactly.
over there. And that's the way Tai Chi was meant to be. That's the essence of Tai Chi, is that intuitive, effortless action.
It's interesting. In NEA, we have a program called Floor Play. And it, when you think about force, right, that's the first force that we work with as infants, right, on the floor, pushing away, rolling over, sitting up, right? But, and then, even then, our primal instinct is to not use effort, but just the right amount of force, right, to create the movement, what I call dynamic is. And there's a language that we use in floor play, and really it's a language just to use in movement. Here's my home move is right here. I'm standing here. Where's the destination? Over there. Okay. And then in floor play, we say, okay, now play between your home move and destination and pick a part of your body you want to play with. Is it your hands? Is it the core of your body? Is it your spine? And enjoy that engagement. And you can engage to get flexibility or more mobility, agility. So it sounds like your intrinsic motivation of felt sense is how you also have shifted your work to personalize so that everybody has their what I call their own signature of Tai Chi.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. This is one of the things that, my teacher, Zheng Liang, says all the time. He says, encourages me as well as everybody else. It says, don't do Tai Chi like me. Like, you got to do your Tai Chi like you. And also that's always changing. Is people will show up for a seminar. I'm sure you've experienced this. Everybody has, where people go, but I swear last year you
Oh,
did
yeah.
another, right. And he always goes, are you doing last year's Tai Chi?
Exactly.
It's not, this is a whole year later, right? Which is another break from conventional Tai Chi instruction. That Tai Chi is an artifact that is always the same. And I think that's the death of any art form, is if it
Absolutely.
doesn't evolve constantly, constantly.
You know
There's another aspect to my teaching,
uh
which I think is really important, and that is that I use Tai Chi now as a tool
Mhm.
for releasing the experience of flow. So, although Tai Chi is in itself its own reward, its own goal,
Mhm.
for me, my body of work now is that flow itself, and the experience of flow is what I think will lead to enlightenment,
Yeah,
which is another conversation. But um, it is an inherent natural ability of human beings that has been dissociated and suppressed. And so we need to, sort of unblock ourselves. And there's many different ways that we can do that. But I think you and I both take a somatic approach.
yeah.
That for me, the body is the easiest key to unlock that door. And so part of that is not to have constraints, or not to have rules, or not to be forced to do things in a certain way. But like you said, have your own signature. Right? My flow is going to be different from your flow. So why should I give you my signature? Right? If I'm doing my students justice, I should help them, discover and embrace and capitalize on their own signature, so that their flow is their flow, not somebody else's.
I've just finished creating a 7-week online program called Awakening Your Sensory Signature. And it really is that. It really is about enlightenment and transformation. And I've started it off talking about creating a fable, a story, so people can drop themselves into something. Could that be? Could that possibly be possible? And it is that I was looking for a way to create an awareness or a relationship with the intangible that is tangible, with the unseen that can be seen. And the make a long story short, it's about connecting to what I call your sensory signature, which is a signature that is enlivened or awakened where when we are in relationship with our physical body, but sensing the 5 layers, 5 ethereal layers. We're listening to the cosmic, voice or resonance. We understand that we're part of a universal mind, but we have a mind. And then also the 7 chakras. And then I'm using the pineal gland as well as the vagus nerve as reference points to feel pulse in a sense or feel flow. And that letting go, I loved it when I was taking Aikido. Today's lesson is to destroy yesterday's learning. Let go what we learned yesterday so we can be in that beginner's mind. So I love what you are emphasizing, that the flow is moving in a direction, not holding us back, not staying in the same place, like our breath, constantly recycling and allowing us to have sustainability and presence in the moment, to be present to life in the moment versus wanting to hold on, which we're taught in school. Now, remember that. Don't forget
Right.
that, right?
This is, something that I emphasize a lot in my teaching, that the way that we were we were taught, that we were inculcated in the education system, is not the way that the human body and brain work at all.
Mm-mm.
We're told that active attention and focused attention, and learning to do it better will make for a better outcome and will cause a better memory. And that's actually not the way that the human nervous system works at all. Um, it is, well, here's the saying that I use in my class, fundamental principle: we get best at what we practice most, we get worst at what we practice least, and we practice most what gets best rewarded.
Yeah.
So anything that you want to remember or do better, or master in some way, it's just all about how much rehearsal you have, and
Yeah.
that rehearsal should be delight, not a chore. And if you think back to what we went through in school, it's like, there's this wonderful line in Paul Simon's song. This is, I can't remember anything I learned in high school. Something, when I think back to all I learned in high school, it's just, I'm surprised I still can function, right? Because that's not what is gonna help you at all in
Mhm.
life. And we wind up practicing and rehearsing a lot of really self-destructive stuff, right?
Do you think that having had traditional schooling and then martial arts schooling, which is what most of my schooling is, do you think that that is why you have the attitude of constant study and working with a master, working with someone that knows more than you? What's the motivation to do that? I mean, you've won medals. You are the master, right?
I um, I mentioned earlier that I'm not great at movement innately, so I just keep working at it. Like I tell my students all the time, I said, the difference between me and any of you is just the volume of rehearsal that I have,
Yeah.
because I've put in, multiples of that 10,000 hours,
Yeah.
uh, because I had to.
Yeah.
So that's and then there is a third factor, which is this delight in connecting with other people. Like I delight in connecting with you, and I delighted in connecting with Chung Liang when I met him. Like there's nobody else in the world ever in the history of the world like you, or like he is, or so. Given the opportunity to hang out and drink in what you are willing to share, is like an opportunity one doesn't want to let go of, right?
Well,
So
I see you as when I think of Tai Chi calligraphy, that's you. You are writing, you're writing it. And I see it, I imagine, if the cosmic scientists got together and said, okay, who can we have do this? Right? Bring bring the constellation of from one point to the next, like the Big Dipper, but these points of, well, you talk about enlightenment, you know, whether it's the short form or the long form, you're gonna get enlightenment. You're gonna be enlightened along the way from one point to the next point. And when things start to connect, the exhilaration of what happens from point A to point B to point C to point D, it's like, oh, the expansiveness of that feeling of being alive and yet being connected to something greater than ourselves, for me, in Tai Chi is one of the most enjoyable sensations. Just, mm, like whipped cream. or a good glass
Right.
of wine. You want to do the physical action of the swallow or the swishing, and then just be silent, right? Just take that in for a moment. Um,
There's real brilliance in your focus on the senses and the sensory signature, if you to pick up on what you were saying. So neurologically, what uh, prevents us from experiencing flow is the what we call cognitive dominance, which is when your brain is default using the prefrontal cortex and a number of other similar kinds of
your
parts of the brain.
executive function.
Your executive function, right? And that kind of default mode is an inhibitor of the flow experience.
Yeah.
It also inhibits the sensory cortex to some degree. So as long as you're in your head, as long as when we say you're in your head, you mean or you're in your prefrontal cortex. As long as you're there, then you don't experience things fully. And vice versa. As you begin to lead yourself or guide yourself or be guided into activating the sensory cortex, then it somewhat inhibits the prefrontal cortex. And so now that inner critic begins to quiet down and recede into the background, and my sensory signature begins to come to the forefront. And that is a flow enhancer, a
Yeah.
flow releaser. So, the language of the senses and I talk about this all the time. It's like I'm tricking people. I'm like, this is part of my training was in something called Ericksonian hypnotherapy. Erickson, as a psychologist, used to deliberately try to bring his patients into a trance state by confusion. Basically, like fucking up your head. So like, like if you ever get a chance to watch a video on Erickson, he mumbles. He's like he's got his little voice. He's talking about. So you come into your class to your his office and you sit down on the couch and he's like, "No, tell me what happened today. What was going on the way over? Did you see the tree on those?" And your brain's like, "What? What do you?" And it disconnects you from sort of logic and executive function and everything until that's so suppressed that then a more authentic experience of the world arises, and that authentic experience is what we label flow.
And that's a word. It's such a buzzword nowadays. I want to express myself authentically. And
Flow, so it has achieved some popularity in the last 30 or 40 years because of a guy named Csikszentmihalyi, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi from University of Chicago. And people lose sight of the fact that his initial research wasn't in flow, it was in happiness.
right.
And so he was doing all of this research into when people feel happy. And as people described what it was like to feel happy or have a happy moment, he said, "Well, what's that like?" And people go, "Well, it kind of feels flowy. Things are kind of flowing." And so then he picked up on that word. Now everybody's using that as a buzzword, right? But the meaning behind that, is what Tai Chi has always talked about. It
Yeah.
it when you talk, so there's a Chinese phrase in Tai Chi teaching called Xiangliang Buduan, which means continuously following without a break.
For me, the teaching that I may think that this stops here, but it doesn't, right?
Right.
It doesn't. And the bark on the tree just doesn't stop there, right?
Yes. This might be something I learned from you guys, actually, now that I think about it. So I uh, talk about flow as partly being a function of synergy.
Mhm.
So the greater amount of synergy that one has, the greater degree of flow one can experience. But synergy is not limited to our own body parts. Space is also part of the synergy. And so as you move through space and as you engage in space, the more that you do that, the more synergy that create. And I actually think that that is a concept that I learned from you guys.
Mm.
How we go through space and the ways that we sort of explore and move, from, as you said, from here to the destination. That also is just as much a part of me as my arms and legs.
Right. I'm moving the molecules in the space, but the space is also moving me. The space is at my back, the space is underneath. Yeah. That feeling of, or that perception of being connected to all that is and being supported inside out, no separation. It's a trip, right? It is a transformational awareness that then creates a connection, a deep connection. Um, I want to touch on the fact that you are a CEO. So not you're kind of like me, right? So you've got this artistry, this lover of life, this curious being. And then in today's world, somehow somebody looks at your art and says, you know what, you can make some money with that. You could support yourself with that. So all of a sudden, this love, this art, it turns into a business, which means now you have to put a business hat on. And I don't know about you, but that's been the biggest challenge for me in my life. Absolutely.
My biggest
What's it
challenge
been
in
like for
business.
you?
Yeah. Um, the moment that you have staff, you are asked to, or it makes sense for you to utilize their body of knowledge and their expertise and their skill sets and whatnot. My biggest challenge has been letting them sort of be too independent of me. This sounds really terrible.
No,
I
I
have a
get it.
very
I get it. How far do you
I have
let
a
the
very clear
student go?
vision.
How far away does the student go?
So so often the things that I probably I'm going to just really assume that you see the same thing. We see things maybe from a couple of steps beyond what is evident in the moment. And so it's like if I say, no, no, we should be doing X, Y, Z, and people say, like, why would we want to do that? Like that doesn't make sense, and that's going to cost us money, or that's
Yep.
not going to this and that and the other thing. And like, we should do this. And then I go, okay, all right. That's why I hired you, because you're supposed to be able to do this better. And then at the end of the day, I was like, I should have just done and made sure they did exactly what I said. And it's not about being a micromanager. It's about I can see around a corner that you can't see.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, so the staff that I have now, I'll give you a case in point because this sounds a little bit all over the map here. About 5 years ago, we were given this wonderful opportunity to participate in the Veterans Administration's community care program.
Yes, I wanted you to talk about this, so I'm so glad you brought it up.
So this is a terrific opportunity for so many different stakeholders. Um, the veterans are able to go into the community and seek both medical and wellness care that previously they were only able to get inside the VA hospitals, but the VA hospitals did not offer all of the things that a person might need or benefit from. And that includes complementary and integrative care like Tai Chi, but also acupuncture. And so under this program, they can now go into the community, just go through the yellow page. Once upon a time, children, there was this thing called the yellow pages.
Right.
Anyway, so and find somebody like who isn't a part of the VA and be able to go to them and be able to have it paid for by the veterans benefits. So one of the programs is Tai Chi, and we were invited to be the national network managers for the community of Tai Chi instructors and providers. So when this opportunity came along, I said, I can see it. I can see exactly how this can work. See exactly the logistics of a centralized website where people come to either sign up for classes online or sign up for classes with an individual who is near to them geographically, right? And it's very centralized because it's so new and it's so unorganized. Like if you want to go to a dentist, like there's organizations for dentists, and
Right.
there's networks and everything. You want to go to Tai Chi, it's like nothing. There's nothing. It's never
Right.
been done before, ever in the history of Tai Chi in the world. So I said, we need to create these kinds of, and then I got immediate pushback from both my staff and a lot of our community of providers because it's like, but we don't want a centralized place. We want to be independent. We want to, I'm like, I get that you want to be independent. I don't think it's going to work,
Right.
but I'll let you do it because I respect and honor your individual, you know, path. And it didn't work. It didn't work for anybody.
Right.
Now we are in there's a whole other thing, which is the politics of government that's going on right now, which has created its own set of problems for us. But if we had established a centralized network the way that I had envisioned in the very beginning, here's what would have resulted. Many more veterans would have had access to Tai Chi, and many more Tai Chi teachers would have had access to the veterans. Many more Tai Chi teachers would have been able to create a sustainable livelihood from only teaching Tai Chi rather than having to do that as a part-time gig or something like that.
Mhm.
This would have been our benefit from doing it my way. Right. And so this is my challenge of being an entrepreneur, being a CEO, is being confident that the reason why you're a CEO is that you carry a vision that other people don't have.
Yeah.
If they had a vision that big, or if they had that much, then they'd be their own CEO of their own thing.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I'm lucky that um Stuart is my CEO, which frees me up to be much more in the educational and the creative element. And you're absolutely right. Being able to sustain the vision and to see ahead, it's like the eagle's view, what's looking at the entire picture. And I don't know if it is an age or cultural, but the desire to want to be independent is really the desire to want to evolve oneself fully. However, we evolve ourselves fully when we are in relationship with. We never evolve ourselves alone. And the challenge, I think, within any organization is to educate and sell the vision stronger together than separate. So I love how you have integrated, David, all aspects of yourself. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a son, you're a CEO, you're a Tai Chi teacher, right? You're also a visionary. And, I remember when mind body became a buzzword in fitness, right? And I kept saying, you got to get Tai Chi, you got to get Tai Chi. And they thought I was crazy. And finally, you were brought to, the idea convention, and it was phenomenal. I remember watching you and looking out at the crowd and going, yes, right? And first of all, for them to slow down and move, and they were just so excited. Again, curious, what is this mind body thing, and it's gained popularity, and in many ways it's also kind of taken away that beautiful sensation that you're talking about. It's become kind of a product. What do you think is missing today in the world of fitness when they hang up a sign and they say mind body or mind body spirit? What's missing, do you think, for most people, or is anything missing?
Well, it's an interesting question. So let's start with, is anything missing?
Mhm.
Absolutely, something is missing. And we know that because people are not satisfied, right? So if there was nothing missing, then people would find satisfaction. They would find the completion that they're looking for,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So absolutely something is missing. Now, the question is okay, what's missing? Or maybe what is present that is hiding what could be brought to the forefront. Bless you, bless you. Um, this is sort of maybe too easy to point fingers at. In which case, I apologize in advance. But the commoditization of
Mhm.
mind body stuff, of course that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like that's no surprise to anybody, and I don't think we should be upset about it. I don't think we should get on our high horse about it. Like, of course, people are going to go, "Hey, this is working for somebody. Let's make it see if I can work for me too." And right, so yeah, yoga cheaper by the dozen. Let's do more of it. Like, of course, that's going to happen.
Right.
And what happens in that commoditization is that it becomes a, a goal oriented. Like this was one of the things that I tried to bring out about fitness and mind body as complementary, not as either the same or different, but as complementary to it. So fitness, by definition, is goal oriented. People come to fitness because they want to achieve something. I want to lose weight. I want to get bigger. I want to tone up, blah, blah, blah. All those things that we used to say 100 years ago about fitness, right? It's a goal oriented experience. Mind body, by definition, is not goal oriented, it is experiential. And so there's no place to go, there's no place to get in mind body stuff, neither in Nia, nor in Tai Chi, nor in authentic yoga. It is an experience that is autotelic, it is self rewarding, right? When you look at mind body in the fitness industry today,
Mhm.
what we have done is goal orient mind body experiences, which hides the actual benefit, if you would say,
Mhm.
of the modality itself. Once you make Tai Chi a goal oriented thing, then you hide, you suppress, you dissociate it from its real benefit. What really would set people free, what would satisfy them, is the experience itself. Right? So, in the if we look at fitness today, if I could give them a piece of advice, it's like without the goal orientation, people are afraid that nobody will show up, right?
Right.
Because everybody is defining their business with them, right? Like, what's in it for me? Like, I have to tell you that what you're going to get. Do enough hours of Tai Chi, you'll lose weight. Do enough hours of Nia, and you'll become a superior dancer. Something like
Right.
like
Right.
there's this goal orientation, and I have to have it because if I don't have it, then nobody will sign up for my class. Fine. So, like, so all those people who wouldn't sign up for your class if you didn't tell them that you're gonna, get a beach bomb, are not the people you want in your classes in the first place. I promise you.
Yeah.
So, so fine. But secondly, I don't know that that's true. People will come, and just like you were saying, when back in the idea days, when we would hold a class at one of the conferences and people would show up and they wouldn't know what to expect, and their minds would be blown
Yeah,
because they could tell that it wasn't a goal-oriented thing, is they could tell that we weren't doing it, and I'm immediately gonna, put on a bathing suit or something. It's like, and yet they were like, "Damn, this is awesome.
right.
I don't even know why,
Yeah.
but it's awesome." Right? And that is something that could still happen today
Yeah,
if you
I think
took
I think
away.
it needs to happen, you know. I don't know if you've been to any of the fitness conventions, probably not in the past few
Not
years.
for years. Not for
And
a few years.
I did out of curiosity and had a booth and really wanted to go and see what's happening in the world. And I felt like I was blasted back into the 1978, 80. It was
Yeah.
shocking. I was shocked. I was really speechless. Um, and I think that goal-oriented thing, I think you're absolutely right. The the experience I think that my generation wanted, and maybe the experience of what a younger generation wants now, I don't even know how to articulate that, right? And that's where I need to hire people that can articulate that, right? Because 'Cause I'm so
So
far
here
away.
the problem is, that people who market fitness, you're right, they're still stuck back in the 20th century and are not taking advantage of the multimedia opportunities that exist today.
Mhm.
Because a lot of what we need, or a lot of what more effectively expresses what we have, are nonverbal.
Right.
Right? So as long as we're talking about it and I'm making a list and I'm making an ad that says, you do this because, right? Right? Then you are already misleading the viewer, from what is the actual program. So our advertisements, our marketing, our PR, um, is more appropriately, more effectively done in nonverbal ways. And now we have the means to do that. We have so much extraordinary video capabilities. We have so many extraordinary AI capabilities. We have the ability to, just put abstract forms with music and sound, make all the things that make up a NIA class and make it so powerful are what could go on the internet without words.
Right.
I did a whole series of things, a few years ago where I would just have a short, like 15-second video of somebody just sort of like walking through a field of wheat, right? And a little music, no sound, no words, no nothing. And at the very end, it says, "Yeah, just like that."
And then it said Tai Chi.
And then it said Tai Chi.
Wow. Yeah, see, I mean, that I ca already I feel that sensory part of me going, "Yes, that's what I want, that's what I need," versus reading. Tai Chi is a practice that involves slow and gentle movements and physical postures, a meditative state of mind, and controlled breathing.
Yeah.
You could say all that, or you could show your ad, and I get the same thing. It
You get
speaks
more.
yeah,
You get more
yeah.
because you're trying to read all these words and processes them and go, is that what I really want? Is that, or is that just BS or whatever? It's like people have such a high BS threshold right now that you put out an ad with all of the ad copy on it, and immediately they're like, I'm not even going to read it.
Exactly.
I don't even care.
Yeah,
Right?
that level of trust, and yet there are so many benefits to movement, whether it's Tai Chi or Nia, helping people regain more mobility so they can hopefully prevent or eliminate maybe falling down. Very important, right? Or help to reduce pain in joints. Um, and all of the studies and the research studies that have been done, you know, um, that the effect of, for example, of Tai Chi versus traditional stretching, right? So of course, Tai Chi is gonna give you more of an expansive, layered kind of flexibility that's not linear, right? So they do this great research on it, and it has physical and cognitive integration, and teaches people to adapt, and all of that research is hidden, and it shows up sometimes in a paper or a reason for why you should do Tai Chi. But what you're really talking about is really talking to that experience inside the body, which then I can hear the research and go, oh, that makes sense. I felt it by just looking at his ad, right?
There's all the time in the world to read a research paper or to understand what the AMA has said about Tai Chi and fall prevention and all that. It's all the time in the world. But if you lead with that, you might as well just close up shop,
Yeah, I think
right?
that is leading with, absolutely. And particularly today, how many times have I seen you want to reduce stress and eliminate pain? It's constant. Everybody's stressed. I think everybody is dealing with some kind of pain, even if it's just feeling pain from watching the news, right? Or
Yeah,
an older generation aging out of things, losing, dealing with parents that are living to 100, whatever it may be. Life is so very different. Um, and we are feeling beings. And I think everyone is feeling so much more without having that, the tool to separate and saying, okay, what am I feeling? Okay, that's that. And so, but just watching an ad and being able to drop into that and go, oh yeah, that's what I need, instead of calm down, listen to this for 10 seconds. Right.
right.
So I love your approach to, I call it the Mrs. Fields approach. Give them the cookie, let them taste it,
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
right?
Yes. That's absolutely. Um, I still do this today. Like this morning, um, uh, my early morning is doing a 20-minute free flow that we live stream directly to YouTube.
Mhm.
Right. So people come in from our studio to participate in there on Zoom. But then I also just, it's just like, I don't even care if you come to class. Of course, I'm going to promote our programs, like, but I don't care because I would just rather give you the cookie. So this is the other thing. It's like the Mrs. Field approach. I'm going to give you the cookie, eat the cookie. Do you want to buy I don't care if you buy a cookie. Just eat the cookie. That's all I care about. Like if you want to come back and follow me to the store and buy some cookies, I think that's wonderful. But if you just eat the cookie and go on your merry way, I think that's wonderful too. Like,
Well, that's the
just
benevolent part of you that's fantastic, right? That's
well, I also believe, like you said, we evolve in relationship. And so we don't get a relationship by what we get. We get relationships by what we give.
yeah.
Right. And so I would rather have unreciprocated relationships than a limited number of relationships based on reciprocation.
Say that again because I love that. I'd rather
Yeah. So, yeah, I said reciprocating means I get something for
right.
what I've just done, right? There's a quid pro quo in there. I said, no, I'd rather have 8 billion relationships that do nothing for me than having 27 relationships where I know they're going to pay me.
Yeah, right? Yeah, beautiful. Um, I'm gonna read something and then we will have a little chit chat. This is about understanding the mysteries, and I'm gonna ask you a question, and then we're gonna dive into the jazz of Tao. And I was lucky enough to be invited. You invited me. I was mesmerized, mesmerized. Now, I study the science of music. So I know how jazz music affects my brain and plays on the tonotopic map and what it does, the rhythmicity of it, um, the chaotic rhythmicity, right? The patterning, the confusion, as you said earlier, right? That then the cognition is coming in at a very different place, and the organization of language is creating a very different delivery in my experience. It was very visceral, very poetic, very magical. I felt like I was having a bedtime story being read to me. I had no idea what the story was about, but I knew the story was had something so important for me to hear. And it wasn't until after that I walked away and I went downstairs and I said, Stuart, I said, this was the most magical experience. I said, I feel transformed. I know that my brain has been rewired, right, from the music. And there are bits of the message that are hanging out in my consciousness that I'm thinking about, right? It was truly just a transformational experience. And I thought, how fun would it be to go to? There's this wonderful bar in Harlem that I love that plays amazing jazz music. How great would it be to go to live jazz musicians and have you sitting on a stool? I saw it. It was like, I want to make that happen for you. All right. So,
Oh God, I would love that. Are you kidding?
okay.
That would be amazing.
All right, so Lao Tzu, in the way there is no correct, and yet it can be used for correctness. For example, you need forests for lumber to lumber is secondary to forest. Forest is secondary to clouds and rain. Clouds and rain are secondary to negative and positive energies. Negative and positive energies are secondary to harmony. Harmony is secondary to the way. The way is what is called a stateless state, an image with nothing in it, unfathomable, yet by it the world can be molded and transformed. What do you got on that?
Well,
What's he saying? What's the
what's he
message?
saying? So first of all, he's the author has already translated. I call it transplaining. So transterpreting. So he's already translated the passage from its original Chinese structure into more modern English and done a pretty good job, I would say.
Mhm.
Um, what is misunderstood about the Tao Te Ching and about how it's structured is that um, number one, that it's supposed to make complete sense. So if you read part of the Tao Te Ching, any part of it, you would go, "Oh, yeah, I completely understand the logic of that languaging of the passage." In the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching, the author gives a sort of a disclaimer as saying that's never going to happen because, and I'll tell you why it's never going to happen, because in the Tao, in the experience of the Tao, there is no language. There is no Chinese. There is no English. There's nothing in there. So what you experience in that moment, and you get it, you like it makes sense. You get a grok of the whole thing, but then you come back into the real world, so to speak, and you're trying to communicate that, and you're using words, and it's like it's never quite accurate. It's never quite. So I'll give you an example. This is very Chinese, to work backwards in a nested series of of some kind of hierarchy.
Right.
So it says lumber is secondary to forests, and forests are secondary to the clouds, and clouds on and on, up to the Tao, which is a stateless state. It's like, okay, so really what it's saying is that all of these things, lumber, trees, clouds, heaven, they are all coexisting inside the Tao. There's no part of it. It's like there is no hierarchy in the Tao. You don't go from trees to lumber in the Tao. Trees and lumber already coexist in the Tao. You don't go from clouds and rain into a tree that grows in the ground. clouds and rain and trees already exist in the Tao. Right? It's only when you come back and you try to explain this shit that you have to go, okay, well, so first of all, there's the Tao. And then, like, a little bit underneath the Tao would be heaven. And then underneath heaven, you have atmosphere. And that is like, so it's only that sort of hierarchy that it only exists in language. But what is the real message of that passage? The real message of that passage is there is a place you can go to, a state of consciousness that you could be in, where you could experience and embrace and be a part of. Like, because here's one thing that isn't in the passage, but which is implied, is that, there's trees and then there's lumber and then there's the carpenter who uses the lumber and who holds the hammer and the saw. It's like, and so you could be simultaneously the carpenter and the lumber, simultaneously the carpenter and the lumber and the rain and the clouds. There is a place that you can go right now in this very second where you can experience all of that. And it's called being in the state of enlightenment. That's what the Tao Te Ching is all about. It's like, it's trying to say, all of your problems, all the things that you experience in your life, all the ups and downs and the ins and outs and the depressions and the triumphs and everything else like that. So all that's just kind of a little bit BS, because you could just let all of that go and instead be one as the carpenter and the lumber at the same time. And that's the promise of it. And if you like, I'll give you this. That's not many in the Tao Te Ching. It says, if you like, I'll give you the step by step about how to do that.
Yeah. Magical. So tell us about this fantastic, I believe it's a book you're working on. I know it's an experience. I can tell you that because I've had it.
Well, thank you for asking me about this. The book is a work in progress. I don't have a finishing date because other projects keep getting in the way. But when you read the original Chinese, even if you don't speak Chinese, if you could just get a translation and you listen to the cadence, the musicality of the original writing, how it is structured in verses and quatrains, etc. And you go, what does that sound like, man? It's like beat poetry, right? If you could just like close your eyes and lean back and listen to Ken Nordine or listen to the Zhao Te Jing, it's like, okay, that's the rhythm. I get it. Like that's what's familiar with it. And there's a purpose, I think, behind the way that the original authors used their linguistic abilities, just the way that a beat poet does, to get you out of thinking in the sort of the normal corporate way of thinking and into being in your body about it, and there is pulse and rhythm. Like I love your use of the word pulse. I haven't used that word in a long time. I love that. Right. So there's a pulse, to listening to poetry and to listening to jazz music, right? And that pulse, the technical term for that kind of pulse is anagestic, means it's your heartbeat, right? I'm listening to the beat of the Tao, the jazz, the Tao, boom, boom. Right? So that is the core of the book. And then my work as a translator is to do what the author of that book you were reading from did, which is to translate from the original Chinese into sort of a modern English, but then to go one step further and say, how can I take that modern English and turn it into jazz poetry?
Yeah. So great. It's so great. And I love poetry. It's the place between logic and mystery. And I love that.
Good.
I just love that. Um, to your physical body, what you've done with Tai Chi and what you've done with the JAZZ of TAO is to touch me through resonance and vibration. And that experience, I know, creates a geometric pattern, a flower of a dance of light in my cells. And that's you, David-Dorian Ross, touching me and touching humanity. When I follow you, my body says, "Oh, thank you for listening." Those connections that we can have with people that turn us on, you call it enlighten. I'm going to say turn on, get turned on, wake up. That is something that when I'm in your presence, even listening to you, I feel the ears of my skin get excited, not just these ears. And that is something that I experience when I'm in front of a master that I know has practiced, as you said, the hours of practice and walks the talk. Not just somebody that goes in and teaches and then walks out and they become a different human being. The music that you create, whether it be playing the jazz or with the words that you tie together, it does have a beat. It is poetic. It is music. Um, I would imagine if I talk to your students, they would say, I walk out of class and there's an I'm I'm encoded with a new imprint of sound and sensation in my body through by watching, those mirror neurons. It's like I think I'm moving just like you, right? Um, and to work with human beings, their physical structure and the form today, as you and I do, to help people improve their function, not just looking to, oh, I want to lose weight, but the function that you're talking about, the function of connection of all parts working together, seamless, not separate, um, raising the frequency, the tone, and the vibration of humanity. That's the body work that you do. And I want to say thank you. Thank you.
It's my privilege. Um,
Yeah. It
it's been my privilege to be your friend for all these years.
long
And it
time, man.
continues to be a long time.
I'm not quite
Yeah.
sure. Not quite sure.
People will say this to those of you who are watching or listening to the podcast. People say this all the time. Yeah, we so and so and I we go way back. No, Debbie and I go
Way
way
back.
back, way back.
So
Yeah.
I want to let everybody know, first of all, this is just a snippet of this genius from this human being. And you will receive an experience no matter what element, whether it's jumping into one of the classes in YouTube or signing up for a training, you're in for a real treat. Um, People can find you at TAIJIFIT.com. Yep. And
Correct.
on the YouTube channel, which I will make available to everybody, where you're doing the Fun Flow Monday through Thursday during July and August, I see, which is fantastic.
Correct.
Is there anything else you'd like to let the listeners know um, that's coming up that you want them to be involved in?
Well, you can come to the website and sign up for another Jazz of Tao session. We've got one coming up here in just a couple of weeks in July. It's one night BYOB, a real like the next best thing to being in Harlem at a jazz club.
Yes.
So we're just gonna kick back, play some jazz music. Like I said, BYO, whatever you got, um, and uh, and we're going to focus on some specific passages this month. What we're going to focus on is what the Tao Te Ching has to say about what is the nature of nature.
Oh, I love that.
What is the nature of nature? And in the Tao Te Ching, um, 2 seconds about something interesting in Chinese language. Chinese characters are usually combined with a part of the character which has a meaning reference and part of the character which has a sound reference. And that sound reference in ancient China, they decided that words that sound alike
Mhm.
shared some kind of meaning with each other. So there are millions of puns in Chinese language, and the Tao Te Ching is full of these puns. So when we say, what is the nature of nature? You got to come and listen to what we're going to pun
Ooh, I
about.
love that. I love that. Well, I will make sure that I get the word out. I think it'd be great, get a whole group of Nia people to come and listen to your brilliance for
That would be
sure.
so awesome.
I would
I
love it.
love Nia people in my class. I love Nia people, period, but they make the best Tai Chi people. They really do.
That's a great compliment. Great. Well, thanks, David, for this beautiful, enriching, and fulfilling experience of getting a little bit of you. And I look forward to more. And if you'd like to find out more about me, you can go to my new online magazine, debbierosas.com. I release 2 articles every single week, and it's really all about body and life wisdom sharing. How can we enrich this experience of this gift of the body, living to our fullest, connected to everything? And first and foremost, developing a relationship with that most important thing we own, our body. And you can also find me on Facebook by searching Nia, on Twitter, Instagram at Nia Technique. You can also go to Nia On Demand, where you can receive 2 weeks free to experience this movement art called Nia. Thanks again for joining me. And remember, this is our time to get in and have a conversation. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.